Welcome into the DNVR Avalanche Podcast. That's AJ back in the studio. I'm Rudo. That's Megan. We, a lot of things to get to. Next week, we're going to be revealing our top 15 greatest Avs of all time. But that will not be today. That's coming later. Today, we're going to be talking about the couple of guys that maybe deserved to be on that list but didn't quite make it. So I'm sure everyone will be perfectly happy with our decisions and that we got everything completely right.
Surely there will be unanimous agreement amongst the fan base.
We barely even came to an agreement ourselves. So
dissenting opinions are not really ever found on the internet.
Not once, no.
I'm looking forward to everybody receiving that list
with grace and positivity, definitely.
Hallmarks of the internet.
The other thing today, though, well, I guess yesterday, really, the Avs signed their first PTO of the offseason.
That we know of. In Peter Holland, who is a 32-year-old forward that hasn't played in the NHL since 2018. He's played in Russia and Europe over the last couple of years. He retired and then was maybe planning a comeback last year, but then didn't. And now is on a PTO with the Avs. Can you explain this?
The only thing I can think of, well, when we were talking about how this is still very unusual despite what I'm about to say. It's still very unusual because he did retire from the game, citing a loss of passion for it, which is concerning. And some of it, I think, stemmed from the last experience in the NHL being what lost passion for him. And so it's possible that in some time since playing overseas, maybe some passion was reignited, but they're still concerned that he doesn't play last season and only 15 games before that. That's just someone who hasn't been in gameplay in a long time. So I wanted to point out how unusual that part of it is, because you certainly hope that the passion for the game has been reborn somewhere along the way. It's going to be very important. But the reason it could potentially make some amount of sense is with the injury to Chris Wagner this summer and preseason. I'm wondering if Wagner was originally penciled in to play a lot of preseason games alongside some of the young rookie players, and because he won't be available for that, they're looking for a body to get on the ice as a veteran presence in those games to meet the limit, so that maybe some of the NHL full-timers don't have to be in those games. They're meeting the qualifications, and maybe this was originally Chris Wagner's job, and he won't be able to do that in preseason, which sounds really mean, and I don't want to suggest that there isn't actually any other plan beyond that for him, but it is an otherwise very unusual call.
I might suggest that there might not be anything more than that to this. I really don't see how Holland would make any sense on the Avalanche roster. Maybe there's a world where he's a tweener AHL guy or something if he puts it together and still has solid ability, but I mean, there's a reason this dude was never really a full-time regular in the NHL and very quickly ended up over in Europe. Not that he's a bad player. I think looking at their statistics, he probably would make more sense in that role than a Chris Wagner, even if Wagner was healthy. Now, Wagner probably fills a grinder role a little bit better. But I don't have any expectations here. If the Avs get anything out of Peter Holland, great.
Yeah, I'm curious. Like, obviously, we're expecting PTOs. I'm certainly expecting a few more.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is a signal that they're done with Curtis McDermott at forward, because, and we've talked about how the depth of their forward core is still shaky. But between Ben Myers, Frederick Olofsson, the impending arrival someday of Nikolai Kovalenko, Chris Wagner, Riley Tufte, some of these other guys that they have gone out and got, and then you do still have
Jean-Luc Foudy and Oscar Olausson are still part of the organization, going to be in the AHL, maybe NHL. Like, I'm wondering if they continue to look for these guys that they think might be able to help them, specifically at the bottom of their roster, because they are done messing with this Curtis McDermott dual role thing. And they're saying he struggled so much last year, let's just let him play one job. And they want to continue to look. And I get that aspect of it. As Megan mentioned, the really weird part of this is Holland himself.
Yeah.
Who was a fine depth guy during his NHL tenure and then was an unspectacular player over in Europe.
Yep.
And then was done. And it's like, okay, a pretty normal thing for a guy to walk away. A guy in his early 30s to walk away when it looks like the rest of his career will be played overseas.
This is not an unusual thing. Yeah.
It's weird to see this aspect of it where it's like he's getting a PTO for an NHL team and not just an NHL team, but one that fancies itself as a pretty competitive club. So it's a real oddity, and he rocketed up my list of like training camp curiosities. Always the PTO guys are always that way because you're like they're literally playing for the right job to just stick at all.
Yep.
But the Avs also have a long track record now of not just giving out PTOs, but giving their PTOs deals. I do wonder about a number
they haven't given deals to as well.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of guys that they haven't given, more guys that they haven't given deals to than they have. But when we've all been talking about all summer, well, we expect them to give out a PTO or two. It is with the expectation that they're doing it seriously.
Yeah.
And I am curious about the veteran minimum. I also don't know. There have been a couple of games in the preseason
where they just didn't.
In my tenure covering the Avalanche, where they didn't hit that minimum and nothing happened. And so it was like, why have this rule? But I do wonder, like having veteran guys for PTOs around does mean that you can sit more of your regulars, especially for the travel. Going to a Dallas or a Minnesota in the preseason, where that those guys are like your veterans, Cale Makars and such are going to be like, yeah, I'm good.
Because of what you just said too about the Curtis McDermott role, I wonder if there would be some reluctance to have young players like Olofsson and Tufte as the extra at points throughout the season not playing in games, versus maybe there's more comfort having someone like Holland as the extra not getting in games, and Tufte and Olofsson are at least getting regular ice time in Loveland. Kind of similar to what we saw with Ben Myers, who wouldn't necessarily have the worst possible game, and they certainly could have used him, but sent him to Loveland to get regular ice time. I wonder if that is what might also motivate them to keep Holland as the 13th forward.
I think that's great in theory. I have to be convinced that Peter Holland is good enough to do that.
Yeah, I won't get carried away. Consider it a Holland-McDermott role generally.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like this, certainly we're not talking about, he's going to be on your third line, because if that guy's on your third line, you're pretty uncomfortable.
Your roster's in trouble.
Yeah, like you're really, he's either had a wonderful preseason and training camp in whole, or you really had some bad evaluation of guys like Ben Myers and Frederick Olofsson and Riley Tufte and Chris Wagner getting hurt over the summer is not bad evaluation. It's just bad luck.
Very bad luck.
So great, it's begun already.
Get it out. That counts as part of last season's. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, the
new season starts on September 1st.
The clock turned over on July 1st. All right, that's when.
September 1st is when
it was early July. I don't know how early.
Clock hit July 1st.
Yeah, July.
Chris Wagner banged his knee on the side of a coffee table and got hurt, and it was like, welcome back to Colorado, buddy. No, I do think with Holland, like, you are talking about a really limited, like, what could even be the expectation here? And so having him as your 13th guy, where you could say, we would rather see a Ben Myers continue to get ice time in Loveland on a regular basis. With Olofsson, you're gonna have the contention of
Waivers.
waivers, which maybe we talk about waivers like it's this big scary thing every
As
year.
if teams don't send
And-
10 guys down at the start of every season.
These guys that it's like people get convinced like there's no way they're gonna make it through, and these guys pass through waivers 4 times in a season.
Yeah.
But you never know when one team really likes a guy, because look at the Avs with Frederick Olofsson himself. The first thing they did in the offseason
Went out
was
and
trade
got
for
that
him.
guy. Yeah.
Anaheim and Megna. Still not sure why that happened, but it did, and I'll never be the same.
I will forever be convinced that was purely out of spite. Yep. That was purely 2 organizations that don't like each other, one that wasn't taking its season seriously and was just like, nah.
Between that and the JoJo claim by Florida a couple of years
You're
ago,
right.
the Avs get spike claimed a lot.
Yeah. That was definitely a spike.
Yeah.
And then they saw him play and they were like, God, come on.
Anyway, it's as AJ kind of mentioned, I do expect to see 1 or 2 more PTOs for the Avs before we get to training camp season.
I'm hoping that one of them, at least one of them, is a guy that we have
Some hope for?
well, like one of the guys that we've talked about as, like the Danton
That are still
Heinens
out
of
there.
the world,
Sure,
where we're like,
sure.
this guy's been in the NHL recently, has shown some acumen in this league. It has not been 5 years of what you've been up to,
He's 1 season from an 18-goal season. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's a lot more reasonable than 4 years out of the NHL.
It's really 5 because he didn't play last year.
Yeah, not 4 full seasons. Yeah, you're right. Anyway,
I mean, it's one thing if a guy's getting reps in Europe and guys come back all the time.
sure. They're usually not very
They
good.
don't
but-
usually retire and then show up on a team's radar at 32 years old.
So let me ask you this weirder claim for a PTO: Peter Holland in Colorado, or Carolina giving Nathan Beaulieu a PTO to be their 9th defenseman?
Yeah, I don't know what is. There's either a serious injury that they have not announced in Carolina, or 2 of them, or they are very comfortable with the idea that they're going to move a couple guys. Otherwise, they're doing all this, and teams are just going to be like, "Thanks for the easy waiver claim."
Yeah, I don't understand.
Like right now, is Carolina's defense not the one that you are looking at primarily?
to harvest something.
Exactly.
Off of,
You're
yeah.
just waiting for them to make a decision. You're like, we're not going to claim other dudes. We're just going to wait. There's no way they carry 8 defensemen, right? Like, have we seen anybody just seriously carry 8 defensemen? 8 like legit defensemen, not the borderline fringy
2
guys.
of those dudes in the press box are not going to be happy with their role.
Right. Like they might be like, oh, they're going to say all the right things, but by the end of November, you're going to have a problem on your hands.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they make it work, to be honest.
So, and certainly they can keep Nathan Beaulieu. Like,
No interest in him.
he's never been very good.
All right, tell me how you really feel.
He just hasn't been, man. He's got
I don't disagree.
if he hadn't been a first-round pick, I don't know that he would have as many NHL games as he did.
Well, there you have it.
That's an interesting dynamic because guys get NHL games because they were a first-round pick, and then they get other jobs because they have NHL games. Because he's experienced. Oh, he's this. He's all these other things come into it, and it's just like, is he any good?
It's not
And
about that.
In Nathan Beaulieu's case, he's just really low-end depth defenseman.
Anyway, we're brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. AJ, you actually follow college football some.
Yep, a little bit.
Should I bet on anyone that isn't Alabama this year?
I mean, Georgia's 2-time champs.
Should I bet on Georgia?
I don't know. I'd be curious what the Alabama numbers look like because everybody's kind of down on the, relatively speaking.
Sure.
Down on what they're replacing a quarterback who's maybe has not moved the needle a lot so far.
I mean, look, all I know is they aren't dealing with a conference that is either massively expanding or imploding. So that's got to help a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the best conference in the sport.
Yeah, well, that's what you get when you're Alabama.
Yeah.
Anyway, whoever you think is the favorites when it comes to college football, you can bet on them with DraftKings. When you go over to DraftKings and you sign up with the DNVR code for a new account, you get $200 in bonus bets right away when you bet $5 on any college football bet. You don't have to get the bet right. You just got to put $5 on a college football bet and you get $200 in bonus bets that you can use. Tons of different options, tons of different games. We know there's a million prime timers out here in the DNVR universe now. So
I was in Lincoln yesterday morning, and a dude talked shit to me because he saw my Colorado plate.
No,
he was talking shit to me about the Buffs, and I was like, "Buddy, you got the wrong guy."
Swing and a miss.
Yeah, I was like, "You've missed this mark so badly, sir."
Also, win a game.
Yeah, try beating the Buffs. Like it's been. RK, I think, has the number
it's
tattooed
like some
onto him.
Absurd amount of days.
It's like 6,000 some days or whatever since Nebraska last beat Colorado. So maybe just tone it down there, Chief.
There you go. If you want to dunk on Nebraska, another option with DraftKings Sportsbook.
Like the rest of the Big Ten.
Hey, get those $200 in bonus bets with the DNVR code. Sign up for a new account. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER in New York. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in West Virginia. Visit www.1800gambler.net in partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bet expires 7 days after insured issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms.
I like to believe that you practice that at home, and Mrs. Rudo is not a fan.
You believe what you want to believe. I believe I got through it. Also brought to you by Illegal Pete's. 11 different locations here in Colorado with fantastic burritos. Go get yourself some fantastic fresh food. Their queso, absolutely delicious. There's one just a couple blocks down from the DNVR bar, so a great place to hit up. Get yourself a little pregame food. Their happy hours from 3 to 8 p.m., so you can snag a margarita, do all that good stuff, and then you can come on down to the bar. Nuggets doing their live show this Friday down in the bar, so if you want to come hang out with those folks.
Signing too.
Yeah, there you go. So great chance to go get some Illegal Pete's and come enjoy the Nugs show. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. Let's actually get into the conversation.
You don't want to talk about Evan Bouchard's new contract?
Do I have to?
Maybe tomorrow.
Okay, there we go.
And now I feel bad that we spent so much time talking about Peter Holland.
This is an Av show at the end of the day.
It's August, too. Like
Edmonton players can talk to me when they win a playoff game against the Avs, all right? Look, we're going to make some people mad today, I suspect, of the people who didn't quite make the top 15 Avs list.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were you guys thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. What were we thinking? I don't know. I was looking at it again this morning, and I kind of got a little like...
Oh, boy.
Well, it was more like I was going through, I was like, did we forget anybody that, like, I felt strongly
really should be there?
Really had to be there?
You ever, like, write a paper, like, super last minute?
That's every paper I've ever written.
I was going to say, the answer is very much yes.
And then you reread it after you've turned it in, and you're like, oh, there's some stuff missing here.
Bold of you to assume I reread it at all.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
I
that's-
actually learned a
that's
long
someone
time
else's
ago.
problem when I turn it in.
If I failed at that point, I've failed, all right?
If I reread my stuff, it'll never stop. So
There you go.
I
You
just
gotta,
can't.
You got to call it somewhere.
The obsessive tinkering and this sentence doesn't sound very good. And it's like, there's like 15 people ever that might care about those changes that I made. Since I'm not getting a letter grade anymore, I'm just like, just let it ride, baby. It's all good.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Let's start with this conversation. A number of defensemen that almost made this list.
Yeah.
We had
Those were the toughest omissions for me.
Yeah, and obviously the big one we omitted, if you saw the thumbnail, was Ray Bourque. We'll get into that. You also have right on the edge there, Sandis Ozolinsh. maybe you could talk yourself into a Tyson Barrie.
Well, and I think that's an interesting conversation because the criteria that we were given was that we needed to consider, longevity, impact, importance to the franchise, things like that, right? And I think that was where I was uncomfortable leaving Bourque off this list, was because the impact sky high.
Sure.
In a year and 20 games. It's just a sky high impact. But you're talking, he was here for a year and 20 games.
Like, just wasn't here that long. And if you're including his whole career, like, obviously he's a Hall of Famer. He's
well, and if you were including, like, who had the best careers of guys who played in an Avs sweater,
maybe top 3.
well, yeah,
like,
you would have. I mean, it would be way different because Ray Bourque and Dale Hunter and Yari Curry were all guys who appeared in Avalanche uniforms.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, guys that were all in the Hall of Fame. You know, and but what did they do in Colorado? And Bourque, obviously, it was hard for me, and he's the one guy that I will take whatever people have to say about disagreeing and where they want to put him on the list. I think he's the guy where you could just say, I get it. You know, if you're a top pairing defenseman on a cup winning team, a dominant cup winning team, you have a pretty good argument to be on a top 15 all time list, especially when you're behind guys who were there for a long time, but not a good time, you know, the anti-millennial.
Let me ask you this, Megan, because AJ and I were old enough to experience Ray Bourque. We were pretty young, but, you know, we were conscious human beings. You were probably a little too young to really experience it. How is Ray Bourque viewed from that side? Is it like some weird lore in Avalanche history and that's kind of it? Or
It's so funny because I don't know if I'm normal. So I don't know if how I experienced Bourque retroactively is what other people like me would also relate to, because it had a pretty big impact on me. Like, when I was a freshman at DU, I wanted to have wall art, and one of the pieces of wall art I had was Ray Bourque lifting the cup, and the other was a pair of cowboy boots. And I feel like those are two things. When you think of Megan, those are the two things: Ray Bourque and cowboy boots.
Megan was not on my list of people who had fat heads on their dorm walls.
and so it's funny that those are sort of the two things that became symbols of what I am, who I am. And the reason it stands out even retroactively as such an important story is because of how the team received him in that moment and the importance to his team in the order of which the cup is presented to him in such a short while. To have that kind of impact on the people who are chasing that cup all together leaves a lasting impression on someone like me. Peter Forsberg was almost named Ray Bourque. That's another piece of information for you to have. And it's just because I can appreciate important pieces of Avs history, even retroactively. And it's like AJ mentioned, some of the difficult decisions in making relates to longevity a little bit. And I think that's where he was harmed, because the impact in the time that he was in Colorado, though short, was huge. He helped them to capture the division, nearly had Game 7 for them then, and then Game 3 when it actually came time in the cup winning year. Those are really important moments that if they don't happen, you don't know that that is a cup winning team that year. And we're looking at a team that has now only won 2 Stanley Cups in my lifetime. It's a really different story. I still think that the 15 that are there belong there, but he absolutely had an impact even on the baby Avalanche fans who came about in the 2010s and beyond.
It's really weird to leave a guy off a top 15 list who produced such an iconic moment in that sweater. And that's and that was where I was uncomfortable with like some of the other guys that we talk about. You know, Cody McLeod's not on that list, but he was a guy who played in Colorado forever. And I think you could make an
conversations
argument.
are tough.
Yeah, like he was so important as like a core Avs guy for such a long time. You know, he was very well respected. He was very well liked by the fan base. but he was never an important player on a good team.
He was not. There was not greatness there.
Yeah, and it was and his best season was his rookie season.
Yep.
And it's just one of those things. A guy like Cody McLeod, I think, was an easier omission, but when you're talking about like top 15, like in Avs history, where you could find space for a guy that played in Colorado for so long, even if he was just more of a just a role player, but was so popular among the fan base.
Yep.
But we didn't even really have a discussion about it because I think it just the Avs have been very fortunate. They just have been too good.
If it was a top 25, maybe you start having that conversation.
Yeah, and if they hadn't had the recent era that they did,
like filled 10 more spots.
If we did this list 5 years ago, it would have looked quite a bit
That's
different.
true.
So,
That's very true.
Especially because like the number 15 on our list that sneaks onto
yeah.
it, is like
spoiler alert. It's from this era.
yeah. And that's also where we can, Ray Bourque obviously he's the thumbnail. He's kind of the biggest name.
Yep.
But not the only defenseman that gets snubbed.
Yep.
Sandis Ozolinsh was fantastic
Yep.
in his Colorado tenure and was the offensive defenseman that all the others tried to live up to. He set the bar in terms of scoring points until Cale Makar showed up. And when Tyson, and then the other one, Tyson Barrie, had the career number.
Yeah,
because he was here for a long time.
Yeah.
He had the longevity and the production, but again, was similarly to some of the guys near the bottom of our list, was not like a big part of really good teams. And then on the flip side of that, Erik Johnson.
Yeah.
Does not make the list.
It
really hurt to leave him off.
It does.
Because his evaluation on that list continues to be hard. Exactly how to, because there's this could have been so much better had he stayed healthy. Had they maybe done a little more when he was
Built
an impact
better
guy.
Team around him, yeah.
Because, he was obviously a part of the Cup team, but he was a hard depth guy by that point.
Yep.
And that was that for me, the Erik Johnson question sat with me a lot when we were talking through the list, and I was like, I just didn't know what to do with him. Where Barrie was, he had the points record, and so that felt like you're gonna leave off a guy that held like a semi-major record for a franchise. And he couldn't make it because there were just too many other good
Unfortunately, every defensive record is kind of meaningless in Colorado
well, it wasn't such a prolific number. It
Right.
wasn't such a great accomplishment that
Makar's literally going to catch that this coming season.
like the other guys are chasing like Sakic and Hayduk,
Which is ridiculous numbers,
And those are like, you guys have had longevity and extended periods of greatness. With Barrie, but Makar in 5 years will have tracked that thing down.
Yeah.
And that's why Barrie doesn't make it. But I will say the EJ one is always going to be.
It's tough.
That was a hard one to not have on there because, he's also a fan favorite, but he was like Cody McLeod, but he was way better in his prime. And it's not necessarily his fault that the team around him wasn't as good.
So let me ask you guys this. I won't put them in order, but rank. If we were taking the list to 20, what order do Bourque, Barrie, EJ, and Ozolinsh come in?
They might be my like 16, 17, 18, 19. Because those were the omissions that hurt the most. Outside of one forward.
I'm sure you'd have probably Bourque at 16.
I mean, it would be Bourque or EJ.
Okay.
Like, I think would be the one that I really that I felt strongest about.
Megan, which one?
I think what AJ just alluded to about one forward is where I am finding the sticky points in like the after 15 point with Chris Drury needing to be 16 in my eyes.
I think that's a fair shout. Yeah.
Ray Bourque's right there in the 16-17 conversation, but Drury is a tough one to be left off this list. But obviously that's a completely different conversation.
Which we'll have.
Well, when it comes to Chris Drury, I just wish you guys could have like live through that.
I do
I
too.
did.
That would have been.
I mean, you know, like I wish I'd been an adult for even for the Chris Drury
totally.
stuff.
I
But
get
like,
what you're saying.
I
yeah.
was old enough at that point. You know, when you're 8, sports look one way, and when you're 13, 14,
They look very different.
they've
yeah.
changed quite a bit. And with Drury, like he was a fan favorite. His postseason performance, like he was such a good postseason player.
Yep.
And they don't win 2001 Cup without some of the special moments that he produced along the way. You know, particularly when they went to New Jersey, down 3-2. You know, he was so big for them that leaving Chris Drury off was tough. Especially some of the forwards that we had at the bottom of this 15 were really good players who
Yeah.
happened to be in Colorado for quite a while. Had they had tenures that were more in line with how long Drury was around,
Yeah.
I would have been like, no, Chris Drury can't
He's better,
be left
yeah.
off this. Instead, it was Chris Drury was so important to that 01 team, and he was really, really good.
Even I know you said 5 years ago, but honestly, the 2022 Cup run has made this list a lot harder to discern
Yeah.
who deserves to be in and out.
Yeah, I mean, guys from this era that are on our that made the list. There's what, 4?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, I'm forgetting one then, but
I think. Yeah, 5.
There's 5.
yeah, you're talking about a third of our list.
Yep.
Came from just this era of Avalanche.
Yep. The last half decade.
Yeah.
And basically no one made it from the 2010s, the early part of the 2010s.
I mean, a couple did, but that's it.
Yeah, one.
No,
At
really,
least
there's 3.
it's
I'll take your word for it. Anyway,
there's 3.
I can't count, apparently.
And they come all right in a row, so
Goalies don't count. I'm just kidding.
That was the only one I got. Was the
Really?
goalie.
yeah. If you remember the list, the 2 guys immediately after him. So.
I clearly don't remember
Yeah.
the list.
I mean, I couldn't figure out how many guys were from this era, so we're just bad at this.
Do math on air, they told me.
Those omissions, like, you know, there were other guys who had like great runs in Colorado, like brief runs or were important.
Yep.
John
you know.
Michael Lyles was in the
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah, John
Yeah.
Michael Lyles. You know, I wonder if Stefan Yell makes the list. Like he doesn't, but like there were some really good depth guys that meant a lot in Avalanche history to the teams that they were on. That won't be on this list, you know, and that's where those guys, Cody McLeod, Stefan Yell, those guys in the top 25,
Yeah.
start finding
You
a
start
home.
having more team impact than actual, like, how good
Yeah,
was
like
this
how good
player.
was this
Yeah.
guy? You know, Stefan Yell being around for as long as he was and being one of the really good 3-4 Cs in the NHL at the time.
Yep.
You know, and then defensemen are always going to be tricky. You know, where do you find a home for? You know, Alexei Gusarov on something like this. You know, it's those dudes are. It's funny because it's easier to place a higher value on offense first players over defense first players unless they are like
That good.
really
Yeah.
good defensive players. Like a guy like Stefan Yell was, but because he played forward, you know, if you're a really good defenseman, you know, you look at like if the Minnesota Wild made this list, you know, Jonas Brodin is like one of their best players in franchise history.
Yeah. Him and Suter are like the 2 defensemen that make it, probably.
Jared Spurgeon would too.
Yeah, fair.
But Jared Spurgeon's also done like he's produced quite a bit of points, and
Yeah.
that was the thing with Suter too. Like those were 2 good two-way guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Brodin's always been like a low point total, and the Avs haven't really had like a outside of the obvious Adam Foote.
Yeah, I was
they
gonna
haven't
say.
had like that like really like obvious like this guy's a great defender. that sticks around for a long time.
There's another conversation I want to get into, but before we do, we are brought to you by Bacchus and Shanker. You can call 222-2222 today. If someone has forgotten who's on your list, they
I'm
can
gonna
take
look
care
at
of
it.
it.
I need to look at it
I
again.
just did. That's what I was
have it.
like.
I have it. I've been cheating.
I just looked it up too. But seriously, if you have been injured and it's not your fault, whether it's a car accident, if you were injured at work, if some freak thing happened to you, you can go to Bacchus and Shanker at coloradolaw.net or the 2 number to get what you deserve. Either way, they'll give you a free consultation no matter what. And if they think you have a case, they will take your case on for nothing. You don't pay these guys until you win your case. They just want to get you what you deserve. 25 plus years doing it here in Colorado. They've won over $1 billion for their clients in that time. So they are very good at getting you that money. Hit the 2 number, go to coloradolaw.net. Get them hooked up. Get your free consultation. Go win some money for yourself.
The guy that I forgot was 9.
9.
Yeah.
I forgot 14.
Oh, okay. He was like the ultimate in-between era dude.
Yeah, for real.
So, anyway.
And also, if you're blind like me, I mean, I don't Shady Rays. I don't think they have prescription sunglasses. So
Yeah, they do.
they don't. Okay, then get your Shady Rays if you're blind like me. Problem solved.
I was actually going to order mine this week.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just another option from Shady Rays, who has dozens of different styles, polarizations, all of that good stuff. Rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. And when you use code DNVR when you buy it from ShadyRays.com and you get 2 pairs or more, you get 50% off your order. That's basically buy one, get one free. So go check them out. Go get the good sunglasses. Go with Shady Rays. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I wanted to shift a little bit more towards Megan's era, and I wanted to have a conversation about Ryan
Megan's era.
O'Reilly.
Goo goo gaga.
You said that, not me. All right. But
Oh, my gosh.
how do you rank someone like a Ryan O'Reilly on this list, who was very good in Colorado, but didn't really have his greatness until much later after he left? Does he get any credit for his time after Colorado, or is it just no?
Well, I think in how we think of him as a player on the whole, certainly, but it's what made some of the players that did make this list very similar is their time in Colorado. Well, in hindsight, some of it was their best, but wasn't projected to be their best.
Yikes.
But all of these players, the O'Reillys and the other players that did make this list, were victim to a really difficult period of Avalanche hockey.
true.
I feel like he does, it's 1, 2, 3, and he's 3 in that list. Or actually 4. He's 4 in that list of then players from this
Sure.
era. Just honestly, I feel like it's a timing thing. Because obviously the impact he had while in Colorado, he was literally nicknamed the Factor
Yeah.
because of the influence that he could have on the course of a game and the work ethic demonstrated here. Those are all things that are really significant. And he also had a lot of opportunity here that I don't think he didn't even necessarily seize. It just, he was able to hold a bigger role moving on, getting captaincy in St. Louis, and I think that's where things really took off when that point in his career happened.
Yeah.
I pretend the Buffalo point
I think we can all just
didn't happen.
ignore that part of his career.
That's a I don't know, that's not a time, but
I think O'Reilly would have had. I think O'Reilly would be looked at the same as Chris Drury is looked at had there been postseason success.
Okay.
And Drury would be looked at the same as O'Reilly is looked at had Drury not had postseason success.
Okay.
Because O'Reilly didn't even really get a chance.
Hey, he scored that one goal.
Yeah, technically, he barely touched
did
that one
technically
goal.
touch, yeah.
But like he was an 18-year-old second-round pick rookie.
That made the league.
Yeah, and on a surprise playoff team, and then that was it. He did not, was not part of any of the part of a Avalanche team that actually won a round.
It's true.
So you look at they were such similar players. The two-way acumen that they were really good really good players that hadn't yet developed into the elite players that they would briefly be. Because I think the year that St. Louis won the Cup, I would say O'Reilly was an elite two-way player.
Yep.
He basically had an 80-point season and was, he's always been such a good defensive forward. And that's, we saw Drury when he went, oddly enough, to Buffalo. We saw his offense take such a big leap there.
Yep.
That and it's always stood out as one of the big mistakes.
For sure.
Was dealing him and not building around, how different is the Avalanche era from 2002 to 2009 if Chris Drury is there behind Joe Sakic on a consistent basis in that era of Avalanche hockey. And, they still end up with Paul Stastny, and Stastny ends up as they end up with Stastny and Drury and Sakic, and there's a transition into a different era of Avalanche hockey that could have looked very different. But with O'Reilly specifically, I think he got good and wanted to get paid, and the Avalanche, they had the Matt Duchene 1-to-1.
No one can get paid.
You guys
more
showed
than
up
that
at the
guy,
same
yeah.
time. You've been outplayed by this guy through the first three through your ELCs. You were significantly outproduced. The one year that was not the case, Dutchie was hurt. And it took a while for O'Reilly to kind of get to that level. But with Duchene, he was really the guy there, and it kind of pushed O'Reilly out. And I think that robbed Avs fans and O'Reilly of an opportunity for him to cement that kind of a legacy here.
Yeah, I agree. If it were up to me, I essentially discounted his future career almost entirely, but I did want to have that conversation. Anyway, I did also want to bring up goalies. I don't think this will be a very long conversation. We put two on the list. But there isn't really a third one I would put all that close. Is it Abisher at 3?
I would say it's probably Budai.
Okay.
And that's really more of an indictment of the longevity of Colorado goaltenders.
They have
because
rotated them very quickly.
Yeah, because guys who had really good individual seasons, maybe one or two of them in Colorado. We've had Alexander Georgiev had a good year. Obviously, Darcy Kemper had a great year, won a Stanley Cup.
Grubauer had some super
Grubauer
solid
had a couple
years.
of solid years. David Abisher had the one really good year.
Yep.
Jose Teodor had his swan song in Colorado was pretty good.
Yep.
Especially in the postseason that year. And then, Peter Budaj had some longevity. Pre-Wa, there wasn't really a chance for Stefan Fiset to
do much.
Yeah. Going from October through December, not a lot of time to get put on a list like that. And so goalies are really there's two guys so far ahead of the rest that it wasn't even a thought for me.
Fair enough. I'm not going to argue on that one.
Hey, if we made a top 30 list, you could definitely have a where does Darcy Kemper one great year where he backstops a
to
cup
the
team.
cup, yeah.
Granted, his postseason was a nightmare, but
It was good enough.
there were circumstances that were involved, but results are results. The guy backstopped a cup team.
Anyone I've missed? Anyone you want to add, Megan?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
I just wanted to throw some respect on Darcy Kemper's name.
Oh, yeah, of
Home
course.
ice advantage through the playoffs. They sit atop the West in the regular season, thanks to significantly strong play of Kemper, even though the postseason and the very weird eye injury were bad. That strong regular season play did help them in their cup run.
Obviously, different tiers here, but you run into the same problem you run into with Ray Bourque, right? Wasn't here for long
So
enough
small.
to
So
really...
small.
Yeah. The big thing there is Kemper, he was the number one goalie
Yep.
for a cup team, and the second half of his Stanley Cup final was
Very good, yeah.
excellent, right? First half was good, and
enough.
there were some moments in that cup, even like Game 5. You give up that Jan Ruda goal, and you're like,
there's no business going
you're
in
like,
that.
bro, and like the Game 1 tying goal from Sergachev from the point.
Yeah,
where
it was
like,
not a great goal.
Like there were some not great goals scored against him in that final And Pavel Francouz won 6 games in that postseason. You win 16 games, you win a Stanley Cup. Pavel Francouz
40% of them. Yeah.
The Avs could have played the ultimate flex, played Pavel Francouz in the Cup final, and not had to give up the 3rd round pick because Kemper wouldn't have had enough games played on their Cup run. Like it could have been like they were that close to that line in the sand with Kemper, and there was a conversation because Kemper didn't play very well because of the eye, and so it wasn't. But his regular season was so good. The second half was brilliant.
That might have been a conversation had the way the Edmonton series played out gone a little bit differently.
Yeah, had Francouz not gotten,
but. The last 2 games of that Edmonton series, it was like, okay.
Yeah, well, and even the first one, Francouz comes in relief and gives up 4 goals or whatever, but because they'd scored so many in that game.
But he got the job done.
Yeah, he did, look, the W is the W at the end of the day. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and a couple of the games that he won, the Avs, he wins games where the Avs are out shooting the opponent, 45 to 20, 25, and you're like, you really needed to win that game, guy.
So let me ask you this next, Megan. Current era, obviously, we already have a bunch of people on this list. Do you think they could get more? Is there anyone currently on the Avs? In my mind, it might be Bowen Byram that could end up on this list down the line. Do you think he can do that? Do you think there's anyone else that could push for that with this current era?
Well, Georgiev could be,
if he sticks around for another contract, definitely,
because his timeline's similar to Bo's, and depending on what Bo does next, I don't know what both their careers as Avs looks like in totality, but also not even longevity. With Georgiev, if there was some reason that he backstopped the Avs to another cup, like something went wrong and he needed to,
ends up
that
with
would be an easy sell for me.
3 straight 920 seasons or something.
Yeah, that would be
good.
an easy sell for me, even in the relatively short time that remains on this current contract.
You definitely are having the conversation if he plays that well. Is there a world where someone like Nichushkin sneaks in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got 5 guys on the current team this year who aren't on this list that I think
could get on it. That 5 is a lot.
Yeah. The 5th one I think is a big stretch and a lot of projection, but I'm on the feels train about it, so I'm like...
Ride it while you're on it.
Yeah, so obviously number 1 on that list is Bowen Byram.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty clear.
If he ends up, as a top pairing defenseman next to Cale Makar for 5 to 7 years... He's gonna get some down ballot Norris votes.
Yeah.
He's gonna score a lot of points. He's gonna bring that kind of alpha male energy, that leading man kind of energy, to the ice in the locker room. And I think that there's a good chance that if those guys are hanging around, they could win another cup. I don't even feel like it's like a big stretch.
It's not. Yeah.
I think Nichushkin is definitely on that list.
Okay.
If he could stay out of any kind of extracurriculars,
all the nonsense,
and stay healthy, which has been a bit of a sneaky issue for him.
That's true.
He stays healthy. That kind of elite 2-way play. If he's a 60-point guy for the next 5-4
years, yeah.
You could definitely start making arguments for him to sneak onto the bottom of this list. Same thing I think is true for Arturi Lehkonen. If he...
after last year, yeah.
If Lehkonen is a 50 or 60-point guy for, let's just say, 5 to 7 years, he's in Colorado's top 6.
Well,
they win another cup. The hard work, the 2-way play, he kind of becomes Colorado's own Chris Kunitz next to Sidney Crosby, where it's like, hey, he's, does his career get made by McKinnon? Or does a little bit, but he also elevates Nathan McKinnon.
When those guys retire, the way the story comes always in the end is like, oh, he was McKinnon's running mate. He was the guy who,
right?
Yeah,
it's always been Mikko as like, oh, those guys are inseparable.
And then Mikko got too good for that.
Exactly. Mikko showed like, hey, we can succeed just fine away from each other.
Yeah.
And Lehkonen, it's not that Lehkonen can't. It's just that I think Lehkonen helps elevate Nathan McKinnon so much that if you project long term, if that success sustains, you can have that conversation. Georgiev is on that list. If he sticks and if he continues to play the way that he did this last season, if you have 5 to 7 years of that, he's only 27 years old. It's not an unrealistic thing. It's kind of a stretch goal.
I mean, if you
and he backstops a cup team, like
if you add another contract onto Georgiev's career in Colorado, I think he certainly jumps Peter Budaj. I don't know.
I think he jumps all the guys other than the two that make our
exactly.
list. If he wins a cup, he jumps
into the top 15 at that point.
Yeah, he definitely becomes 2. So I think those guys have it, and then my big like stretch guy here is Ross Colton. Where he would need,
you're dreaming big on that.
He would need to
become.
He would need to become their legit 2C.
Yep.
And have very, very, very productive seasons, and it would have to stick.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to be a fan favorite, and I think that we are going to see a pretty big year out of him.
I hope so.
But that's obviously like shit has gone super well.
Yeah.
Talking about a guy, we haven't even said his name on this, but a Nazem Kadri.
He was someone who crossed my mind.
Is another like complicated case because you could argue they don't win a Stanley Cup without him.
Yeah.
But you can also argue that his dipshittery cost them a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Because if he's available for the Vegas series
where he doesn't play,
if they get through that Vegas series, they win the Stanley Cup. They beat Tampa that year.
I think you're probably right.
They definitely
they win the West for
come
sure.
out of that like zombie West.
Yeah.
Because they would have had to beat Montreal.
Yeah, and
that would have happened.
That would have looked a lot like the Tampa versus Montreal series.
And then exactly. And then they would have beat in my opinion, they would have beat Tampa that year.
I think you're right.
So I think
not the world we live in.
That's where Kadri, it's like he was obviously so incredible that whole regular season and the postseason, but there were still so many pockmarks there that I was just like, I wasn't ready to do it yet.
Some other names that you could probably make arguments for: Adam Deadmarsh, Valery Kaminsky, Alexei Gusarov,
Claude
Lemieux, Andrew Brunette. You start getting
you're way down. I mean, at that point, you're in Marek Svatos territory.
Yeah,
John Michael Lyles. Like, are these guys even top 10s in their positions? You know?
Yeah, it gets a little bit tough there. You could have, obviously, the era is going to hurt him, but if you're talking more of a Ray Bourque full career style, Jerome McGinley did play here for a decent amount of time.
Yeah. I left him off of my list of Hall of Fame guys that played in Colorado, or if you consider full career.
Yeah.
Pierre Turgeon.
Yep.
As well would be there.
Yep. Number of guys like that. So, is Ryan Smith in the Hall of Fame?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Oh, the NHL's lowered the bar so much that I'm actually like not confident.
Maybe.
Like, I don't even want to say that. I would think no though. His numbers were like.
I would also.
He was like a good player.
I mean, he was very good for a little while before he came to Colorado.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Not the point. It's interesting.
Oh, one last name. I would like to ask about if he finishes contract here. Where's Sam Girard in this? Because by that point he will have been part of a cup team, but he didn't play for all of the cup run because of the injury. Yeah. If he stays healthy on another cup run,
he probably falls into that top 25 range, I would assume.
Yeah, it still feels like where the Johnny Lyles are.
Yeah, I think decently reasonable. And maybe he rocks up and scores 70 points this year, and we have a different conversation at that point.
If that happens, they are winning a Stanley Cup.
I don't think that will happen, for the record.
But it's like, what would it take for him to get on this list? Like, does he need a string of 40, 50-point seasons? If they lose Devon Taves and Bowen Byram doesn't stick around, but Girard does,
try sneaking into that 15 spot a little bit.
Yeah, if he ends up, if he continues to be a top 3-ish guy for them
for another half decade.
Yeah, if he just finishes this contract.
Yeah.
I'm not even looking at the next contract, but that, would he be like? His legacy, I think, will be complicated if he sticks around.
Yeah.
He never reaches quite the heights that EJ did in his prime. But
if he sticks around, he could arguably end up second in most of the Avalanche defensive records.
Yeah, his scoring would have to come up a bit to chase down Barry.
But he should be in that range.
Yeah, but I mean, if he plays 5 more years,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
but yeah, I would agree that he's so far in his career, he's been a better defensive player than Lyles was.
Yeah.
And that's just like if you have a guy that plays in your top 4 for 10 years, you know, and adds a bunch of points and has postseason success, like
That's
it's like
how
Sam Girard and Eric Johnson. Where
yeah.
which guy am I describing? You know, so it's that's one of those where
I'd like to see the leadership quality emerge because, like, that's what's true of Eric Johnson and Johnny Lyles.
That's
is
very
that component
true.
in
Yeah.
the
Great
room and
point.
having that value. Now, that could be a quality in Girard that I'm just less familiar with, but this would be a season for it to become really important if that was something that he carried. And I think the other thing is, and though I hate it comes down to this, but the moments that change the course of something, some kind of event. Like we talk about the game-winning goals with Drury, and even
iconic moments,
regular season moments for Tyson Barrie that he was the player that won the game. And I think that with Girard, that would be what also takes him over the edge, is if he could solidify his name alongside a very important moment.
So Girard's the next Huey Croup, confirmed.
I mean, you're talking about moments here, and like, you know, no surprise. Like, I don't think I'm going to shock anybody when I tell them that Devon Taves makes our list.
Oh, yeah.
But like, you're talking about a guy who, you know, we'll get way more into this when we actually reveal the whole list or whatever. But like, that's a guy that has been at the peak of his abilities. He's been near the peak of the NHL's abilities.
Yep.
He's produced. He was a top pairing dude on a cup-winning team, and he produced big moments.
Yes.
Big moments that you can easily point to. What are your top 5 Sam Girard moments off the top of your head?
Game 82, he scored the first goal of that game, and then it gets tough after that.
For me, the second one on that list is he had this like awesome spinorama, and then he picked a corner in San Jose. And then after
was
that,
the one
it's
he
just
like walked in San Jose, right?
It's it's after that, it's a collection of spin moves where you zoom the one in Buffalo, or whatever Buffalo forward it was that just had his ankles broken, and he went into the boards really hard, and like it's like silly stuff like that. It really speaks to Megan's point. There needs to be another. You can find bigger Josh Manson moments than Sam Girard moments
fair,
right now,
yeah.
like iconic Josh Manson moments.
Josh Manson jumped into Sam Girard's arms after he scored that goal. All right.
That's actually a great memory.
Maybe the most impressive part is that Sam Girard caught
Actually,
him.
God didn't fall over.
Fighting to bring gas.
Yeah,
That's a fair point, Brad.
That's fun.
That's-
No,
I would say I would even expand it to the bullying of Alex DeBrincat that has taken place in Sam Girard's career.
Yep.
So needs an iconic moment, needs to stick around, needs to produce a lot of points.
A healthy, real postseason run, I think, would do a
right,
lot
because
for
he
him.
was robbed of that because of the injury.
Yeah.
I do believe in that.
What was it, game 3
Of the St. Louis series, yeah.
The first period.
Yep.
It's like 90 seconds into game 3. You're in the 6th out of 20, what would be 20 playoff games. You just never got that chance.
Yep.
So, and, you know, you look at, obviously, we're not going to look back super fondly on the Seattle series.
Yeah.
He was really good in that series.
He was.
I want to say really steady in that series on a team that was
There was no
so
steadiness.
Up and down.
There's no steadiness.
So up and down. Sam Girard was one of the few like steadying forces, and I just think he's a guy that I guess, you know, I'll put 6.
Okay.
A lot would have to go right to even get half of those guys on there.
Yeah.
But you can at least envision like
A world where it happens.
Are we
yeah.
talking about any chance that it's Miles Wood or Ryan Johansson? Like, no, not right now. Something crazy would have to take place.
Yep.
Nikolai Kovalenko,
There you go. Now you're really dreaming.
Jean-Luc Foudy.
Put Gulyev on there.
I thought about it. Where I was like, because when you were asking her the question of like, oh, you know, what do you envision? And I was like, man, Gulyev is going to be a good fit in Colorado.
going to be fun. We are going to wrap up our show here. It's almost noon our time, so we do got to get out of here. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us, talking about some of the guys who didn't quite make it. Like I said, next week we're going to reveal the whole list, and we're going to go head-to-head with some of the other sports in Denver.
Yeah.
See where some of the Avs players end up on the all-time list. We appreciate you. We will see you tomorrow.